Hi, everybody. Welcome to Federation Hall. My name's David Sequeira. If you haven't met me, I think we're all friends by now, surely. But I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery. I'm also the person that puts together the Art Forum program, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. And before I introduce our guest speaker, please join me in grounding yourself in the deep knowledge that for generations, the Bundanon and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced the arts here. They practiced song and dance, painting, sculpture, practiced healing, shared stories, and those rituals and traditions continue today. And please, with joy and honour, let's acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. So our guest speaker today, I should have asked, can you all hear me? Is that all clear? Okay, great. Gian Manik's approach to painting is informed by an irreverence for genre and resistance to stylistic categorisation. Driven by a compulsion to paint, Gian's artworks move dexterously between the polarities of figuration and abstraction, often sprawling into the modalities of fashion and music. Within Gian's layered surfaces, references from the fabric of his daily life and familial history converge with gestural passage to form a chaotic palimpsest of representation and memory. Nostalgic, melancholic and facetious, Gian's paintings vibrate with emotional and compositional intensity. Recent solo exhibitions of Gian's work have been shown at Gertrude Glasshouse, Sutton Gallery and Bus Projects. Recent group exhibitions include the Ramsay Prize 2023, Like a Wheel That Turns, the 2022 Macfarlane Commissions at AGSA, and Gian currently lives and works in Naarm, Melbourne. He has a Master's in Fine Arts from Monash University and a Bachelor of Fine Art honours from Curtin University. Gian was recently artist in residence at Bundanon in New South Wales and at AGSA in Bali, Indonesia. Last semester, he taught here in the honours program, and he's currently teaching at Monash. Whether you're in Zoom land or here with us in Federation Hall, please join me in making Gian very, very welcome.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land in which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and future and acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy. I haven't spoken to an audience like this for a while, so I'm a bit like, but I kind of wanted to keep it light and not really read from notes, even though I wrote some. But David sort of introduced what I was about to say next in a different way because I think that was from Sutton's website, so it's pretty on point. But it's kind of a bit of a this is your life thing with a big gap in between of art school and when I was younger. So I'm kind of wanting to talk about family and the influence from that to begin with, and then chat about probably the last 10 years of exhibitions that I've had, mainly in But if you had any questions or wanted to interrupt anytime along the way, I'm happy for you guys to do that. So yeah, just shout out. So I think that's when I was going to say what my work's about. That's already done. But I thought we'd start at like clowns. This is kind of what I grew up with when I was younger. My house was my family house was covered in paintings. My granddad, which is his painting on the right-hand side, was a cleaner. And then when he had a heart attack, when he was about 60, he started painting full time. So yeah, our house he never exhibited anything. He just kind of did paintings in the shed. This was before I was born. And then put them up in the house, and they were always, I kind of noticed when I was taking images, when my mum was sending me photos of these paintings that we had, images from these kind of books that they had in their library. So they were always sort of like studies or copies of things that existed that you could get from op shops. And I wasn't the most popular like person to play Lego with because we had clowns all over the place. But yeah, it's something that I guess I didn't think so much about in terms of a subject that was kind of spooky. I guess this made it been like, yeah, I wasn't allowed to see it until after that, I guess. So yeah, it's just interesting to sort of, yeah, be brought up with these things that I knew were good paintings by looking at other art books from famous artists that we had in our like family library, but also not really knowing where they came from or even seeing the reference by doing like Google image reverse searching, not being able to find the exact thing, but something similar to it. Um, so these were another ones, still lives. So they were all oil paintings, and kind of, you know, quite normal-ish sort of size for what you'd expect for the subject to be, and kind of hung in a salon way across our house. So fast forwarding, this is my mum's painting on the right. So similar to my granddad, I guess, she studied art when she was in high school. And we had these paintings also in the house. And I found them kind of a bit sort of not scary, but a bit strange. There was another one, the eyes kind of, I don't know, you know, when you sat on like, I called it gaze sitting, my legs were always up and just like looking at these portraits and they'd always like look at you around the room, which didn't sort of spook me out. But I guess I knew that she did them, but I also didn't really believe it because they just looked so old. But I think that was like a technicality of, I'm not going to wank on about painting, but the lean over fat tracking thing. Yeah. So yeah, I guess like that's kind of like a bit of a familial passage of how I was really used to seeing art all the time, but then also being influenced by these books that we had, I think, 86 of, like a kind of library of really sort of standard books. And when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to watch TV after school. So I it didn't seem like it was annoying for me to do. It's something that I was quite interested in. And I think that I've never really been forced to enjoy art from a young age. It was something that I really felt, yeah, comfortable with researching or studying myself. So I kind of would like not, I didn't really like Van Gogh that much or Seurat. Like I'm just looking at the ones, I guess I was really like focused on the kind of like realism and quite, you know, like, I mean, you'll be able to see it in the next slides, but yeah, it was interesting the things that I would focus on. And my mum she's also a primary school, or was a primary school teacher, would kind of encourage me and come and then say what's wrong, which is kind of, it was brutal, but it was also really good. And it's kind of how I've sort of tried to teach in a more technical way, maybe outside of uni. But yeah, it was something that I was really pissed off about, but then it helped me sort of understand and kind of negotiate how I wanted to approach representation from a young age and being able to represent artwork. So I thought I'd start at Michelangelo, just a little bit of a chill. I was like thinking about cool artworks that I really like and that were formative. And then I was like, I'll just go like all the way back to, you know, but it's interesting sort of seeing how those early kind of formative years have influenced artwork throughout my career, especially in the last 8 years or so. And thinking about how I wrote it here somewhere. I got it from a Netflix film, how like a study of the past is an exploration of the present. I think that's kind of interesting to have in the back of my mind with being able to sort of pick and choose and kind of create this like library of things that I could be historically influenced by to understand what I'm interested in, or something personal, or something that I'd like to explore in the future. So this was a show at bus projects. I'm kind of fast forwarding now. I'll go back a bit. These are just the sort of like reference that I found when I was like looking at these books from the past, and then how they maybe have kind of seeped back in recently. My little lockdown moment when I was kind of like, I'm going to try this, like Dutch still life painting, Klimt painting that I was really obsessed with when I was really young, and I painted it on my bedroom wall. When I was pretty, like, I can't remember how old I was. So I had this work in the Macfarlane Commission, which had the IKEA horrible bed where I slept on the top, and there was a desk down the bottom, and then the painting next to it, which is where it would have been on the wall. And then another work from that AGSA show, which was, I guess, a reference of the Stubbs painting that the NGV actually owns here, which I didn't know about until recently. But yeah, these are just sort of from those great artist series books that I kind of circled back to unknowingly too long ago. So it's a bit of a like Jesus sabbatical break. So when I was like in I think year one, I went to art classes after primary school. I think I wasn't sure if that was like an aftercare thing, or if it's something that I did because I had older sisters and they did it. But I really enjoyed doing it, and yeah, it's something that I looked forward to after school, as opposed to like any sport that I did for about 6 months. Um, so I'm kind of flying through this when it comes to, yeah, like between that time, but I guess art school, I had a bunch of like interesting art related jobs. I've always been like, lucky is different, lucky, but also kind of worked quite hard at wanting to really focus on just doing art related work if possible. So I had the opportunity to be a court sketch artist for a few years in Perth, and then back here, or here when I moved, and also working in prisons teaching painting to inmates, as well as teaching at various art schools and also Curtin University. And then we come to 2014. So I moved here and studied from 2010 to 2012 at Monash. And then I guess I started exhibiting. I was still kind of exhibiting back in WA, but not so much here. During my master's, I sort of, I guess, came up with this umbrella of work that I was interested in, which was kind of using figuration, but in a way where I would manipulate reflective fabrics, photograph those, and then paint them verbatim. And it kind of satisfied these wants that I had with being able to paint something from an image, because I haven't been able to ever do that from my mind, but also explore, I guess, painterly qualities, gesture and technique and brushwork of like abstract expressionism, which is what I've always liked, but wanted to bring back into that representation during that phase. So this kind of body of work, I somehow, thinking about it now, I'm a bit perplexed, but I'm surprised that I wasn't really bored of it, because it lasted for about 8 or 9 years. But I think that I thought that if I was taking a photo of something within that surface, because it didn't have an image or color or whatever was in front of it, it would change inherently. So for me, conceptually, it kind of made sense to kind of keep working on it until it sort of hit a mark, which was slide, which is a large work that I did as a collaborative piece with 56 high school students from northern Western Australia in South Headland. And I guess I wanted to sort of like create this environment for them where they weren't given a task to have to carry out to sort of satisfy my artwork, but it was more about this real idea of kind of them enjoying the process or trying to set up parameters or opportunities for them. So I encourage them to sort of not think about if they wanted it to be on the floor to work, and if they wanted to incorporate graffiti and other sort of non-figurative or figurative elements, but non-human elements. So it sort of did end up as some kind of a landscape. And I think that was like a huge point of departure with that foil. Like I sort of tried to incorporate, I've got a detail, those sort of foil vignettes over the surface, and it was a bit facetious in a way because it was kind of going over and within their work. But it was probably the last time that I painted like that, because I just thought that having that sort of break and looseness, being able to sort of incorporate recognizable images and bring narrative across the surface, made it more kind of, or gave my sort of work a bit of an agency to, use more recognizable subjects to say something that could be in competition with each other in an exhibition. So after that, I had a show at Sutton in Fitzroy, and it was using those sorts of ideas across different paintings. So there were a series of works. On the left-hand side, there's a bunch of landscapes, and then, the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side, there's a work that referenced, the text is pretty big, Mum's Rembrandt's Continued. So I guess me sort of wanting to kind of carry on that, legacy is a funny word, but maybe that through my own practice, but also with that particular subject, and then referring back to like an old master, that's something that people knew the name of, and then also potentially recognized images from art history. But it was interesting because I think that I don't know if I found interesting, but having these really quite disparate bodies of work in the same space, opposite, adjacent to each other, it took me a while, like a few years, to wrap my head around confidently saying that that was important for my practice, rather than thinking that it was anecdotal or potentially a mistake. That like painting could have that kind of gymnastic or agency around work to work and also body of work to another. Another large, I guess similar to the last one, it was kind of bringing in this idea of kind of collage. So it's sort of working across a surface, which is funny now because like I said before about these foil works, I'm like, that makes me feel a bit anxious thinking about that style of working, not really knowing what it is going to look like, because I feel like I plan things so meticulously now. But yeah, it was a good sort of like break for me to kind of not be so precious, or to be able to add something. And the idea of something being finished didn't really kind of exist within these works. They could be sort of returned back to, I think. I don't know. Like this is like another like lockdown moment. So I think that I just, after thinking so kind of hard about these subjects that were so meaningful and kind of about mum and dad, and thinking about that as this extension of self-portraiture from this foiled subjects, these two people make me, and that's self-portrait. And then I sort of broke that and just wanted to sort of make images that I responded to in a way that, the same way that I researched things that were meaningful and important. So they just operated on a purely, something that I responded to quite immediately. And I just thought this was a great title for an article, and also image. So there was a body of work that were just about, things that were quite, it was almost like a couple of months through my life, and I would paint something that was about a relationship and then this and then something else, and then having those to create like a complex kind of like up and down thing rather than thinking about exhibition to see this sort of no offense. I love people that do this as well, by the way, but like the same thing kind of across a series of walls repeated. Um, that fed into this body of work called field works. So I think another thing that I feel like lots of people do this, the agency around why I would begin to make work could be something that is quite heavy. So these works were kind of about nightmares that I would have when I was, so I feel like I need to lie down and like get like a therapist couch out. Like I would have these nightmares after they were, and I don't know if they were fever induced or the other way around, but I always have run really hot and I would start sleepwalking, and they would always be the same things, which were about curtains or mazes that didn't have any kind of finite edge qualities. And it's something that I kind of have always been quite interested in with composition in painting. So I wanted to kind of look at subjects similar to the last one where they could be, you know, quite heavy and deep, but then also quite light, and paint them in a way where there wasn't a finite edge to the surface, so it could continue on the back or in memory after you've left the exhibition. And I think I sort of coined it, not I coined it, but I'd like to think of them as like having this edge anxiety, which operates for me when you're actually making a canvas, and also those sort of ideas and decisions that you make when you're painting as well. This was one of them, contemporary dancing. So similar to those other collage works where I was working through the surface, just Googling what the title was and then sort of filling up the space. This was for the Macfarlane Commission. So it was a body of work where I think having the opportunity to create something where you're not given a direct order or sort of like question to respond to, other than I think it was a really like loose idea of painting from the expanded field for that show. So I went back to this like eternal sort of idea of that Dutch influence of Golden Age painting. So thinking about these, I think there's like 7 kind of like pillars of Golden Age painting that have like a hierarchy of importance, and it starts with history painting, goes to portraiture, still life, interior, da da da. So I think what I wanted to do is have a suite of works where each painting kind of ticked a box to represent one of those pillars. This was history painting, so I was really interested in going to, I wasn't particularly interested in going to the NGV, but I wanted to go somewhere where they had large historical paintings from not necessarily that era, but something that depicted war. So for this one, I wanted to make the scale quite grand, but then also the imagery, this really like, ridiculous kind of versions of, male pornography, but then also stock images of men at war, and having this sort of seam down the middle, which is, you can really see it, but things coming from the left and the right. So it has that sort of like 2 sides of something, but it's not really recognizable to see which is what you would necessarily support, or a positive or a negative. This was the landscape version of it. Like I can maybe, oh my- so yeah, I guess another, same sort of thing as what I was saying before, really trying to sort of pivot and create something that was authentic for their own experience of the painting. So I wanted to do this landscape painting. I had a residency coming up at Bundanon, so I was interested in that kind of old archetype of Australian landscapes, and this like sorry, I don't know. I'm just trying to be careful with what I say about things. Um, like this idea of the male kind of artist having to escape the city and find himself in the country and like leaving their families and painting and doing all this sort of stuff, which I found really kind of ridiculous while I was there. And as soon as I got there, one of the people sort of was talking to me about cool burning practice, um, which is like an Indigenous fire practice where they um, have like controlled burning. And it was only introduced in that zone into one really tiny area because the people that owned land didn't really believe that it was a thing. So I thought that that was kind of the most interesting part of the whole month that I spent there, which was in the first 30 minutes. So I painted that for the trip. And then just like a self-portraiture, little. So the recent show that I had at Sutton, which was coming from a informal residency at the Australian Ballet. And they were doing a performance of Don Quixote. Yeah, once again, it was more just opportunistic. I don't know if I'm particularly interested in, well, I'm not interested in Don Quixote. I got the book, but on the bedside table, and that's good enough. But um, yeah, and ballet is amazing, but it's, like I think everyone's the ballet, you do this and this, and I'm like, yeah, it's good, but I feel like this, being able to sort of move in and around subjects and seeing an opportunity that piques interest enough for me to kind of plan and sustain enough to create a body of work, which was for this one. So I kind of yeah, was more interested in the pre and the post than the actual performance, which was, I guess, a nod to Degas. So I did research the story's themes and characters and its different iterations and production qualities, but I didn't read the book. I just looked on Wikipedia. Um, and then, yeah, selecting references tenuous or not. So kind of with that first image from the beginning of the presentation today, it had old Spanish paintings plus a painting of an old pirate. There were people from the production from the 70s film that Nuraya took when he was in Australia. And then these, which were done by hundreds of photos that I took when I was actually visiting the Oz Ballet doing their practice. So there's all these kind of like things that created the genre throughout time or created that narrative throughout time that I sort of spliced together to create, this show relating to not so well the story, but then mostly also just the opportunity of looking at dancers perform. It's the recent show at Gertrude Glasshouse. Um, so it's like I guess with that space, I knew I wanted to do something that was quite impactful. Hopefully. Um, but it's funny because I'm not exactly sure why I chose to do that. I think I watched a film with Guy Pearce about um, him being a master forger um, in, I'm going to get this right. And he, anyway, he painted this Vermeer painting. And I guess it was just like one of those things that kind of like sparked interest and then how that kernel could become something that kind of rolled on to become as a big enough idea for me to create a body of work around or a work around. So it kind of, back to those great artist things really circled back to me. I've spoken to a few people about this. Like, I don't really consider this as like a forgery or a facsimile, but more of just a study. So it kind of relates back to how I would study and try to look to things and kind of, I guess copy is the right word to a degree, but, reference marks and lines. And I've always found it easier to paint paintings because the work's done there for me. So I quite like the idea of having images that don't have a particular hierarchy. So if they are pre-photography, then me looking towards paintings to replicate or study, or if it's, maybe in the future AI, maybe not. Or photography, film stills, Google images. So yeah, it was interesting. I guess the story around it, this was the second iteration of the Sapper Emmaus by Caravaggio. Um, and I guess I just also liked that idea that he had to do two of them as a commission. And the second one was done from memory. So like the images existed through these kind of sketches and cartoons that he did, rather than having the work to actually replicate. And the back, I think yeah, I guess this is just obvious. Like I kind of wanted the back to sort of have the like gravity of it being almost like a prop rather than a forgery. So, if this was being filmed and it was about that, I think that's what I'd be happy with, rather than people sort of thinking that it was something that I was trying to replicate. And then this is the last work that I had recently in New Zealand. So it was a show called Mine, stemming from a residency at DESA in Bali. And I was doing lots of research about Orientalist painting and thinking about how, once again, like Bundanon, the artist kind of traveling to this place, which is seen as exotic, and then kind of acclimating that culture and creating paintings from it, which are, both beautiful but also problematic. So me sort of looking towards that canon of Western art history through Orientalist lens, and repainting those by kind of highly cropping into them, using once again like Google search to sort of identify the areas that create that identify the subject through the painting. So it kind of crops out a lot of the background and landscape. And then last image. So this is a large work that were there were two large paintings flanked alongside these old kind of Orientalist studies, um, which I think operated in the same way of me sort of going to this destination, which a lot of tourism happens, and then seeing, that west to east um, thing that happens where people sort of take culture and then also experience sort of like, yeah, holiday king mode. Um, and yeah, I just found that image funny. And also, yeah, the scale kind of flanked alongside these kind of small, kind of sort of quiet images, but they operated really similar to me, in terms of how it was speaking about old, new, east, west, big, small, that kind of thing. That's it. Um, yeah.
Thanks so much, Gian.
Thanks.
We have got some time for questions, and I'm just wondering if anyone has a question. Come on, do it.
I think I heard you as well. Of my work. Thanks. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I love her. Yeah. She's like the I really love her. Yeah. I don't really like, I don't know. I would say her, I really like the coffee bean paintings a lot. Which I think yeah, I'd known of her work before. And I think contemporary painters, I do respond to them strongly when I don't love everything or when something is maybe a bit too ridiculous or something might be a bit serious or I don't, like that body of work's this or that. So yeah, I don't know if, yeah, I like her as a painter. Be able to think of them on the spot. I should have like I'll come back to you. Yeah. Yeah. Same. Yeah. Mm, mm, mm. I think that I feel like I feel like recently I would say that I'm more porous than I thought that I was. But then I think that's maybe like thinking that I'm becoming less punk or something, and uh, feeling like I can sort of circle back to something that was important or learned or tacit or disregarded from the past, and then sort of employ as a tool to critique it or to enjoy something. Um, yeah, yeah. I think that it's like I feel like there's that sort of like cliche of artists unlearning and then creating, but I feel like maybe I could unlearn, learn, recalibrate, go back to do it better, disregard, like be a bit more sort of chaotic and sort of, yeah, porous in my approach to sort of, yeah, wanting to kind of like, if there's like a conceptual gap, sort of like spack it with whatever is the best, like painting for that. Yeah, weird reference.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I didn't know this until I didn't think that I was like this because I feel like, when you're in art school and that people are like, oh, that's how they work and that's how they work. And I guess either I wasn't interested so much in how other people did things or like I didn't show the way I was doing things. But I feel like I plan like really heavily and I do lots of research. And then when I get to a point when I start painting, I don't really have to think that much. Just like even those ones where it's like quite sort of like collaged, I would print everything out before and have them with some kind of idea in my head. And the planning that occurs on the surface is more sort of like um, I guess it's more sort of like technical than conceptual. Yeah. But yeah, like before I started painting, I kind of know what it's going to look like. And that maybe just comes from that sort of like, I didn't go into it, but when I was quite like 13, 14, I had a mentor. So I had like this, is it mentor? What's the Seinfeld reference? Anyway, I had this like painter, and he was like this like very sort of like cartoonish figure. He was like burnt in a fire, lived on top of a hill, and like had like a paintbrush stuck to his two fingers that worked, and would like hit my hand when I did something wrong. And I had to like learn how to paint alla prima, which is like wet on wet. And I would only have 4 hours, and it didn't matter how big it was. So like, yeah, I feel like I should wear like a beret or something, but it was like something I might didn't tell anyone from school, but like, yeah, it was like it gave me like this real rigor around how I had to sort of approach something to not be disappointed, waste time, labor, or like emotion throughout the actual process of painting it.
Yeah, please.
I don't. I need to like get a little GoPro or something. I feel like that's the embarrassing part about uni, where they're like, use your body. And I'd be like, fuck you. And then I probably do that a lot more, like, but I guess I just, yeah, I think usually when something's larger, I physically have to use more of my body, because of if the image, like if I'm painting something and there's 500 figures in it, large, then I'll probably have to like locate my movement to be a lot more sort of contained. Whereas with the feet one, I'm like, well, the toenail is going to be like that big, and the movement your body makes kind of, yeah, sympathetic to that, I feel. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I don't know if I answered that. The gestural things are like more about scale and, yeah, because I know the smaller works I find really relaxing, and I don't have to think so much because it's just so contained.
Yeah, and thank you
Thanks.
so much. I mean, I think back to the talk, and we moved from, the clowns all the way through to Caravaggio, and it's that's an extraordinary generosity that you've brought to the VCA. So
Thanks.
please, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much.
James.
And before I say, well, no, tonight, 5:30 is the opening of Majlis 2024. You'll all be very, very welcome to be there, and the announcement will be around 6 p.m. Otherwise, we'll see you next week for Art Forum next Thursday, 12:15, same place. Thanks.